What's up, guys? It's Randa. So today we are going to be jumping right into a breakdown of Fear Street Part 2, 1978. Got a very atmospheric thunderstorm going on outside. Hopefully that won't be disruptive. We are not going to be getting into Part 1 in this video, so if you're curious about that one, go watch my Part 1 video. And as always, this is a spoiler warning for the entirety of the video. We're going to delve into everything that Part 2 had to offer. So again, if you have not watched that yet and you want to without being spoiled, go watch that and then come back to this one. We open with a quick recap of Part 1, so if you have watched that one already, you will recognize all of the highlights from that, and from there, we jump right into meeting C. Berman for the first time. She is alone in her home watching news coverage with her dog, and honestly, it's a mood. When she goes to turn off an alarm, we see a note on her coffee table that says it's happening again, which we will recognize as the note from Nick Good in Part 1. So obviously, the sheriff knows more than he has said thus far, and he obviously has some connection to C. Berman that we didn't know about previously. She turns off an alarm that's labeled dinner, and as we kind of pan out, we see a whole cabinet full of alarms, all of them with different labels like Jeopardy and Video Store. So whatever happened in C. Berman's life before, it really gives us a sense that it has led her to keep a very strict, regimented schedule on her life. C. Berman helps herself to a dinner of microwave mac and cheese and Jim Beam, and honestly, I'm ready to propose to this woman already. Her next alarm is labeled locks, and as we see her going through her house, double-checking the multitude of locks on her front door and then all of the windows and things like that, we see that she has her house locked down like it's Fort Knox. Say it with me, folks. Handling trauma like a champ. As she passes a calendar, we see that the current day is October 3rd and it's labeled day 5,937. So I'm sure that wasn't some super formative event that happened in her life 5,937 days ago. After she falls asleep on the couch, she's awoken suddenly by some really loud knocking on the door and then like rattling of the doorknob, and then we start seeing flashlights peeking through the windows, moving along the house, moving along the exterior towards where she is at in the living room. By the time the flashlight reaches the window where she was before, she has already hidden her dog, Major Tom, away in a closet, and she is hiding from the flashlight beam as somebody begins rattling the back doorknob now. But oops, when she got distracted by her dog earlier, she forgot to get the window lock on in the kitchen. So someone opens the window and begins to climb through. C. Berman grabs them, pulls them through, and brandishes a knife at them, and it's only then that we see it as just our protagonist from Part 1, Dina. And like, really, Dina, breaking into a traumatized woman's home in the middle of the night by climbing in through the window? Like, that's a really good way to get yourself killed, as evidenced by the knife that's being brandished at you right now. We then see that Josh is with Dina, and they take C. Berman out to their car and show her where they have Sam tied up in the trunk of the car. C, rightfully so, freaks out and tells them they need to leave, because even if nothing supernatural was going on here, being an accessory to two teenagers kidnapping another one and having them tied up in the trunk of a car, it's not a good look. Dina tries to appeal to C, saying that she is their only hope since she's the only one who has survived the witch before. But C tells them that their only chance is to get out of town and run as far and as fast as they can. But, to none of our surprise, teen lesbian Jesus can't resign her girlfriend to that fate by abandoning her, and honestly, it couldn't be me. I love nothing and no one that much. As soon as there is a murderous witch in the picture, I'm out. Catch my dust trail out of town. Bye forever. Don't care. But the emotional plea works on C at least, and she lets them into her home. You know, through the actual front door this time. After tying Sam up in the bathroom, they sit down to talk, and C shows them the sketchiest notebook ever, full of pictures and news clippings and sketches and whatnot, and she tells them that she and her sister went to Camp Nightwing in July of 1978, and a week later, her sister was dead. Buckle up, folks, because we are now officially in flashback mode. We cut to a girl, Ziggy, running through the woods, and she very quickly catches a wicked clothesline to the face by some dillweed teenage boy. 3 girls come out of the woods to join him, and after dragging Ziggy to a specific tree in the middle of the field, they tie up her wrists and suspend her from the tree while reciting the rhyme about the witch that we heard in Part 1. Surprise, surprise, the ringleader of the group, Sheila, claims that Ziggy is possessed by the witch and that this is the same tree where Sarah Fear was hanged in 1666. She then claims that the only real way to stop a witch is by burning her, and so then she demands the boy give her his lighter, which is, you know, totally normal, sane teenage behavior. She's apparently willing to burn another human being over the theft of $10 because she burns Ziggy's arm before two counselors come running out of the woods and put a stop to it. One of the counselors, Kurt, takes it upon himself to play camp judge, and when the others insist that Ziggy took the money, he tells her that it's her 5th strike and she's out. Because, that's a more pressing concern than tying a girl up in a tree and burning her with a lighter. The other counselor points out that if they kick her out, people are going to ask questions about the burn on her arm, so they decide to let it slide this time. So gracious of them. I know I personally would be ecstatic to remain at this camp after this happened. And we then learn that the more level-headed counselor is Nick Good, but Ziggy is not impressed by his do-gooder antics as she storms off back to camp. We get a montage of the picturesque activities of Camp Nightwing before we are introduced to a young couple, Cindy Berman and Tommy Slater, who are cleaning the camp in preparation for the color war that night. Cindy realizes that 2 counselors are missing from cleaning duty, and when she goes to find them, she discovers them being amorous somewhere else. While Cindy is berating them, we can really get the sense that Cindy is very straight-laced because they rag on her for having snitched them out before, and then they refuse to help in cleaning up and doing the tasks around camp. Ziggy goes to the nurse's station, but when Nurse Lane seemingly isn't there, she peeks into her office and sees a notebook that has a news article about Ruby Lane, as well as a drawing that is labeled the Witch's Mark. Nurse Lane appears and startles Ziggy, and so then while she's tending to the burn on her arm, which first of all, tending to the burn on her arm by putting ointment on her arm with her bare fingers, wow, they do not care about medical practices in this camp. But anyway, while she is tending to her burn, Ziggy asks what the Witch's Mark is. We learn that Ruby Lane, one of the killers from part 1, was Nurse Lane's daughter, and she knows that the killing spree her daughter went on is a source of gossip and rumor and speculation around town. She says that the doctors called it a psychotic episode, while the kids in town believe it to be the result of possession by Sarah Fear. Nurse Lane has a bit of an episode herself, as she rants about the incident while bandaging Ziggy's arm too tightly, but then she snaps out of it and dismisses her as if nothing happened. Cindy intercepts Ziggy at the nurse's station, reprimanding her for getting in trouble, and we very quickly see the juxtaposition between the personalities of the 2 sisters, with Cindy worrying about how Ziggy's behavior will reflect on her, and Ziggy being dismissive of Cindy's plans to leave Shadyside by going to college, saying that no one ever leaves the town. The confrontation first with Alice, the counselor, and then with Ziggy is clearly bothering Cindy as she goes to the mess hall with Tommy to continue cleaning for the day. And she goes alone to find a new sponge when a noise draws her further into the building through the kitchen, and she sees an open drawer that reveals the most disorganized knife drawer I've ever seen in my life. Not hazardous at all. Cindy is relieved when she finds Tommy again, but then Mary, Nurse Lane, appears with a large knife in her hand. I wonder where she got that. And she insists that she saw Tommy's name on the wall, and so he is going to die tonight one way or the other. Tommy has no idea what she's talking about, but that's suddenly not the most pressing concern as she lunges at him and attacks him with the knife. They struggle, and Tommy is able to knock the knife away and knock her out on one of the wooden benches in the mess hall, and then we cut to see paramedics taking her away, handcuffed and strapped down to a stretcher. Even as the ominous mood seems broken as soon as the dinner bell rings, the incident has obviously stirred up all of the old gossip and speculation about Ruby Lane and Sarah Fear and now Mary Lane among the campers. Tommy understandably is unable to shake what Mary said to him, even though the other counselors dismiss it and just make jokes about the witch. Cindy tries to talk to Ziggy more about what happened with Mary, but Ziggy insists there is something fundamentally wrong with Shadyside, even if the very rational Cindy doesn't want to admit it. She says there's a reason for why things always seem to go wrong in Shadyside, and that someday it will happen to the 2 of them, just like it happened to Mary today. Cindy calls Ziggy a monster for her cruelty, and then when Ziggy opens the door to her cabin, we see that Sheila and the other girls have vandalized her cabin with a lot of spray-painted phrases that say things to the same effect. While giving the Shadyside team their color war pep talk for the night, Tommy is really not looking his best. He's spaced out and distracted, and he keeps hearing these whispering voices in his mind before Cindy interrupts him, but he dismisses the way he's feeling as just a result of the knock he got on his head during the fight with Mary. Cindy and Tommy then break into the nurse's station because Cindy is insistent about learning more about Mary's behavior, And when she finds an unlabeled bottle of medication in Mary's desk, she is eager to latch onto that as the reason, right as Tommy finds the notebook that has the witch's mark and the writing about the deal that Sarah Fear made with the devil in it. They're interrupted by a sound, but it turns out to only be Alice and Arnie, the counselors from before, breaking in to steal whatever drugs they can now that Mary's gone. Alice steals the notebook and begins reading from it, but they then find a map in the book that Mary has marked up and written all over, and so Alice and Arnie run into the woods to follow the map, and Cindy and Tommy chase after them. Ziggy, meanwhile, has revenge on her mind. Nick interrupts her while she's stirring up a paint concoction, but rather than turning her in, he actually offers to help her. Out in the woods, Cindy and Tommy get held up for a moment, and when they catch up to Alice, they realize that somebody has dug a bunch of what seems like graves out in the woods. Tommy figures out that the X's on the map correspond to where Mary has dug these holes, and so they kind of put together and speculate that maybe she was looking for Sarah Fear's lost hand in order to end the curse. A little further in the woods, Arnie and Alice find Sarah Fear's old house, and despite Cindy's protests, they go down into the old basement. From an extinguished candle that's down there, Alice discovers that someone has been there very recently. And Cindy follows Alice and Arnie through this like small stone passage in the basement. And they find the witch's mark carved into the floor with candles set around it, and then a bookshelf with a bunch of old books and like occult items set on the wall. Arnie crawls out of the passageway first, and it's to find Tommy unresponsive in this trance-like state. Back in the room, Cindy pulls a few books off the bookshelf to reveal another passageway, and she hears those same indistinct murmurs and whispers in her head that Tommy heard before. But before she can explore any further, Alice pulls her away, seeming rattled for the first time, and shows her some stones set along the wall that have names etched into them, and they're all the names of past Shadyside killers with one exception. Tommy's name is now the most recent name on the bottom of the list. Cindy and Alice return just in time to see Tommy take an axe down from the wall in the basement and strike Arnie with it before turning on them. They flee back into the witch's mark room and move the bookshelf to reveal that other passage, and then hurry along it to escape from Tommy. When Tommy grabs Cindy, she manages to kick him away into the side of the passageway, and it causes a cave-in that separates the two of them from Tommy, but it doesn't kill him. Tommy emerges from the witch's basement with the axe in hand and then heads back through the woods towards camp. Back at camp, Sheila is following a note and a trail of flower petals from Will to the bathroom, but surprise, it's actually just the prank that Ziggy and Nick have set up for her. They drop a bucket of bugs and spiders onto her from the ceiling before fleeing and locking her in the bathroom. Back in the cavern, Cindy is trying to find a way out while Alice is too distraught by what happened, saying that they're going to die down there like Arnie did. But Cindy is persistent for a reason. She knows that none of the past Shadyside killers stopped at just one victim, and now Tommy is up there with all of the other campers and counselors, including her sister. Alice realizes that when Mary failed to find Sarah Fear's lost hand, she spotted Tommy's name on the wall and tried to kill him to put a stop to it before he could become possessed and commit a killing spree of his own. Back in the camp, several Sunnyvalers free their friends from the Shadyside Color Ward jail, and when they run off, Tommy appears and kills the kid who is left behind. In the Science and Nature building, Ziggy and Nick are sharing some bonding moments, exchanging questions to get to know each other. Nick calls out Ziggy on dodging questions about her relationship with her sister, and Ziggy calls him out for not being the picture-perfect guy that everyone expects to follow in his father's footsteps as sheriff. Ziggy finally opens up about her past and her sister, and Nick confides that having so much expectation on him isn't easy either. Just as they share a kiss, screaming from the camp interrupts them, and then they go to find Jeremy, the Shadysider from before, dead. Back in the cavern, Cindy and Alice make it to the center of the witch's mark on the map, and it's a smaller space that's filled with like this black liquid and flies buzzing around. And at the center of it, there's this like gross tissue thing that's pulsing like a heart. And when Alice touches it, she sees flashes of all of the Shadyside killers from the past. And when she looks at Cindy, she sees a dead, mutilated version of herself. So she panics and runs through the cabin, seeing victims all over the place in these hallucinations as she goes, before she trips and breaks her ankle in like a pretty horrific manner. Like, I didn't need to see it. No thanks. At camp, Nick and the other counselors are shepherding all of the campers into the mess hall, but their current head count is only at 23, meaning they're missing about 30 other campers and counselors. Well, I guess you can mark Arnie and Jeremy off that head count. Kind of literally. Anyway, so the phone is dead, and Nick won't let Ziggy go search for her sister, insisting that he and Gary will go search instead. But after Nick leaves, Ziggy realizes that they left Sheila locked in the bathroom, so she runs off to go save her. Meanwhile, Kurt and another counselor, Jones, snuck off to have a tryst of their own, and when he goes to shower after, she is the unfortunate next person to catch a swing of Tommy's axe. Back in the cave, Alice is incapacitated because of her ankle, and while Cindy is stabilizing it with a rudimentary splint, she confesses why she snitched on Alice before and why she changed her whole persona and avoided Alice back when they were friends. She was trying to avoid what seems to befall all Shadysiders because she wanted to get out of town, but Ziggy was always her inescapable reminder of the truth, and she admits that she now knows Ziggy was right about Shadyside being cursed, and Alice admits that she has resorted to self-harm as her own way of coping with Shadyside. And it's a really affecting moment, both because you can understand that desperation of wanting to get out of a small town when you see how many people have been trapped in that same cycle before, and because it's always just so heartbreaking and sobering when anyone feels driven to those measures to cope with their situation. The moment is interrupted when Cindy notices some of the same moss that she had to clean up all over camp, and they realize that they're close to camp. While Nick is trying to find the remaining campers, Tommy corners 2 more of them in a cabin and finishes them off next. Ziggy makes it to the bathroom and goes inside to find Sheila, who attacks her for the prank, and Cindy and Alice manage to make their way to where the cave leads up to the outhouse, and they can hear Ziggy and Sheila fighting above. Ziggy manages to knock Sheila out right as the other counselor, Gary, arrives, and then they can hear Cindy and Alice screaming for help from the cavern below. In his search, Nick finds the 2 bodies of the campers that Tommy killed most recently in a state of, let's charitably say, overkill. While he's being sick at the sight of such violence, Kurt runs up panicking and saying that he found Joan dead when he came out of the shower. Nick tells Kurt to get back to the mess hall and to ring the bell in 15 minutes. That'll be the signal, and they will get the kids out of camp on the bus. Back in the outhouse, Ziggy has lowered the bucket she used for her prank on Sheila down into the cavern to act as sort of a lift for Cindy and Alice. But right as they get Alice to the top of the cavern, Tommy storms in and decapitates Gary, sending Alice crashing back down into the cavern below, along with Gary's body. Ziggy dodges around him and runs off into the night, where she runs into Nick, and then they lock themselves into the Science and Nature building to hide. Their moment is interrupted by Tommy punching through the window and unlocking the door, and they manage to move hiding spots as he walks through the building, but he does spot their bloody handprints on the floor from where they were before, and so he smashes one of the tanks to release the snake into the building from its tank. Nick and Ziggy are trying to remain calm and quiet behind a table where the snake is slithering on them, which, joke's on you, Tommy, I would already be dead of a heart attack. You're not getting me. But Tommy grabs Ziggy's hair and pulls her up over the table and onto the floor. But before he can hurt her, Nick shoves her out of the way, and he gets slashed in the leg instead for his efforts. In the cave, Cindy and Alice realize there must be another way out. Consulting the notebook again, they realize that the old meeting house on the map is now the mess hall, so there must be another exit there. Alice insists that with her broken ankle, she'll only slow Cindy down, so Cindy runs ahead to find Ziggy and make sure she's safe. Speaking of, up above, Ziggy, right as she gets back to the main part of the camp, she sees the bus pulling away with all of the remaining campers and counselors inside, meaning she is left behind and on her own to deal with Tommy, who is now stalking down the trail behind her. While Alice is trying to secure the splint on her ankle, she realizes she's gotten a nosebleed. That's right, folks, nosebleeds are an omen of something to come in this one again. Recalling something about the notebook, she checks it to find a particular phrase. When she is near, blood will fall, her hand laid to rest atop Satan's stone. She realizes that the stone she is currently resting against is the aforementioned Satan's stone, and so she begins digging around the moss at the base of it. Further ahead in the cavern, Cindy finds a spot where the ground slopes up, and it ends at a metal grate set in the floor of the kitchen in the mess hall. And this happens right as Ziggy runs into the mess hall from outside and locks it behind her, turning on the radio as she runs past. Unfortunately, Tommy kicks the door open easily and follows Ziggy's wet footprints through the mess hall into the kitchen. The sound of the music is currently masking Cindy's attempts to kick the metal grate open, and as we pan past, we see the open knife drawer again as Tommy finds a locked door at the back where Ziggy is hidden with a knife. As Tommy walks past, Ziggy creeps out of the cabinet she was hiding in, but right as she is sneaking up behind him with the knife, the music runs out and she steps on a creaky floorboard. Of course. We love a horror convention. As he spins to face her, she stabs him in the chest and he punches her. And so as they struggle, Tommy is choking Ziggy out against a shelf, and she reaches behind her and grabs a burlap sack off of the shelf and shoves it over his head as trying to choke him out with it. And if you watched part 1, you will obviously recognize this as the burlap mask that the Camp Nightwing killer wore in that. Tommy throws her off of him and then chases her back through the kitchen, right as he trips her and is going to strike with the axe, Cindy stabs him in the back. Although she froze up earlier when Mary attacked Tommy, she has now found the impetus to act and to fight back in the name of saving her sister. When Tommy turns to face her, she stabs him repeatedly until he falls to the floor. The sisters hug and share a genuine moment of relief and recollection, and Cindy apologizes to Ziggy for not being there while she was trying so hard to get out of Shadyside. They hear noises, but it turns out to only be Alice, having finally made her way through the cave to the grate in the floor, and Cindy pulls her up through into the kitchen. Alice reveals that beneath Satan's stone, she found Sarah Fear's lost hand down in the cave. Reading from the notebook once more, they read the passage that says that Sarah's curse on the land will last until her body and her hand are reunited. And since the map led them to her lost hand, they deduce that her body is still buried by the hanging tree that's right there on the campgrounds, and that they can end the curse and save the town. Right then, Ziggy gets a nosebleed, and the blood drops onto the bones of the hand, causing her to see flashes of the witch, just like Sam in part 1. The witch is angry, and they decide they need to bury the hand immediately. Back inside of the cave, we see that kind of the heartbeat of the cave is now pulsing faster, and a bunch of tissue separates from it and begins to form into this being. And back on the stone wall, all of the names of past Shadyside killers now seem to be oozing black blood. Now that Ziggy has seen the witch and her blood has touched the bones, the witch's curse is focused on her, and now all of the killers are rising to pursue her, including Tommy, whose hand we see twitch as he lies there on the kitchen floor. Right as the three of them are about to head out to bury the hand, Tommy rises up and strikes Alice down, and Cindy retaliates with the shovel, decapitating him. As they're mourning for Alice, we hear singing emanating from the cave through the floor. Surprise! Ruby Lane is here to join the party. And as the girls run out the door into the night, more killers rise up to join Ruby. We cut to the sisters in the field, running to the hanging tree and beginning to dig beneath it, which, that's a really big tree. Good luck assuming you're digging in the right spot, I guess. Unfortunately, the killers are already there and are starting to emerge from the forest all around them and head their way. Ziggy hits something as she's digging, and they pull up a stone that has "The Witch Forever Lives" etched on it. Bad news, girls, the body's not there. More bad news, all of the killers are there and are getting closer by the second, including Tommy, who has recovered from his decapitation just fine. Cindy knows they're after Ziggy because she bled on the bones, and so she tells Ziggy to get ready to run. As she pushes Ziggy into a run, Cindy runs interference, hitting Tommy with the shovel, but then taking a blow to the face that sends her to the ground. As Ziggy turns back to see this while she's running away, she basically runs right into the knife of one of the other killers. Zigged when you should have zagged, girl. Come on, it's right there in your name. I'm so sorry for that one. There's no excuse. Both of the killers take several just absolutely brutal blows on each of the respective sisters, especially Tommy with the axe on Cindy. And things are just like not looking good for the Berman sisters. As the sisters lay dying with their arms outstretched towards each other in the field, Ziggy sees one more flash of the witch and then both sisters die. We know from hearing from C. Berman in part 1 that a boy saved her life by performing CPR, and who do we know is now the only boy left at camp? That's right, Nick shows up and starts performing CPR to resuscitate her, and it works because she gasps back into consciousness after a few moments. And that's right, folks, Josh finally puts it together. C. Berman is not Cindy because Ziggy's real name is Christine. Christine reveals that she told everyone the story of what happened to her sister, but no one believed her. No doubt, everyone was quick to believe that an already troubled child was confused by the traumatic and senseless death of her sister and conflated it with local legends about the witch. Unfortunately, when Christine says that no one believed her, that includes Nick. Or if he did believe her, he was unwilling to risk his destiny in the town by throwing his lot in with her. After the trauma of her sister's death and what happened at the camp, Christine is convinced that there's no way of ending the curse and saving the town. But the kids reveal that they did find Sarah Fear's body, it's just not beneath the hanging tree. They believe that they can really end the curse by reuniting the body and the hand, so now that they've found the body, all they need is the hand. They ask Christine if the hand is still buried beneath the hanging tree, and we cut to the Shadyside Mall. That's right, they built the mall around the hanging tree, which is now a central fixture of the mall. What a morbid way of displaying your weird history as a town. Dina and Josh are digging underneath the tree, and they do unearth the lost hand. While the kids are at the mall, Christine calls Nick and he hurries over to her house. The kids pull up on the side of the road near where they found Sarah's body, and Dina tells Josh to wait in the car for her. But she suddenly gets, you guessed it, a nosebleed. Are we sure this is a witch's curse thing? Like, have we checked the elevation of this town? Dina goes down to where they reburied the bones before and places the hand with the bones. As soon as she places the hand on top of the skeleton, she has a vision, and then she finds herself in Sarah Fear's place in the flashback. She's covered in blood and holding a knife as she leans over a trough of water, and as she looks in the water, she sees Sarah's reflection staring back at her. Someone calls Sarah's name, she turns to look over her shoulder, and boom, to be continued. That does it for part 2, folks. As we bid farewell to 1978, we are heading all the way back to 1666 and the origin of all of this with the upcoming part 3. Personally, I have my own speculations and musings about how it will all tie together, especially as we see a lot of the same actors portraying people in the town in 1666, which I do think is an interesting way of doing that. I'm not going to delve into any speculation or theories here. I'm going to just let it ride. This video is long enough as it is. Let's just all wait for part 3 and see how it develops together. Once again, I really liked this one, just as I did with part 1. Again, I thought they did a great job with the cast and the characters again. I loved the 1978 vibe. That is just honestly such a perfect time period for some of the best slasher fics that we have. Speaking of, I forgot to mention it in my part 1 video, but while part 1 is very reminiscent of Scream and kind of pays homage to that especially, but other horror movies of the 90s, part 2 is very reminiscent of Friday the 13th with, the camp setting, the era, the looming masked killer. There are so many parallels there, not in a way where it is ripping it off, but it's a great homage to all of those classic horror movies. I really enjoyed it. I'm very excited to see what they have for us with part 3, considering what they have built up so far. So yeah, I guess we'll find out on Friday how it all turns out. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and please share any thoughts you have about part 2 down below, or any speculation, any theories you have about part 3, if you are as excited as I am to see how everything comes together and resolves. If you enjoy my content, you can always subscribe to my channel, and if you do, be sure to hit the bell icon so you are notified every time I upload something. But other than that, I have been Randa, this has been the Southern Fried Nerd, and I hope you have a great day. See ya!